Brand Republic, ek wil net gou weer ons agenda net 'n bietjie in die rede val gou. Daar's 'n paar belangrike goed wat gister, vandag en môre gebeur het. Die eerste een is gister. Gister het Nico Vermaak hier langs my 60 jaar oud geword. Kom ons sing vir Nico.
En Godfrey verjaar vandag.
Vandag is Godfrey Legatla se verjaarsdag. Godfrey, where are you? He's not in the room at the moment. Godfrey is in our research. There he is. Happy birthday, Godfrey. Kongres en dan môre. Neil, is jy nie in die saal? Neil Klaasen? Daar sê, Neil, ek wil graag hê jy moet hierdie boodskap asseblief môre aan jou pa oordra. Oom Kneels Klaasen is môre 80 jaar oud, ons vorige voorsitter van NAMPO. Baie geluk van die hele kongres, baie geluk oom Kneels, ons waardeer jou en ons kyk op na jou. Baie dankie oom Kneels. Daar is hy. Goed, Nico, ons is in jou hande. Jou 60 jaar oude hande.
Voorstel Derek, baie dankie vir die goeie wense. Back to Congress and back to business. We've got a last election to do, and that is for the additional members serving in our executive, and that is for our developing producers. And the way it's going to work, only developing producers, irrespective of the region that they were nominated for, they can nominate now for this position. So, if you please turn the voting letter to page 4, please use that. Nominate the additional member to serve in the executive, die addisionele lid wat in die hoofbestuur dien. Ons gaan vir u so oor 'n paar minute dit afsluit en dan gaan ons gee vir die verkiesingskomitee. Voorstel terug na jou en nou gaan ons lekker kyk na die graanprodusent van die jaar.
Goed, baie dankie Nico. Brand Republic, kan ons die video van die graanprodusent van die jaar funksie asseblief inspeel?
The rolling green fields against the backdrop of the Langeberg reflect the grain farming vision that Pieter de Jager had 20 years ago. A vision come to life by caring for the soil while riding in with a precision farming movement.
Ons was maar grootendeels veeboerdery gewees, maar die graanafdeling het my getrigger eintlik en ek het dit gesien as 'n uitdaging en sodat ek maar die kans gevat om die graanvertakking bietjie uit te brei.
With a cum laude masters in agricultural management, this fourth generation farmer joined the family operation in 2003. Through his modern approach to wheat and canola production, grain farming now makes up 80% of the business. Pieter's dad retired 10 years ago, but still visits regularly, astonished by the ever-increasing scale and precision of the crop production.
Vandag is presisieboerdery en tegnologie die ruggraat van ons graanvertakking. Sonder dit dink ek nie sal dit moontlik wees om met graan te kan boer nie.
Here, every square meter of the soil is managed individually, while Pieter also views soil conservation practices as crucial to sustainability in this area.
Op ons hoë risiko gronde bring ons die veevertakking in met 'n lang rotasie met losering weidings wat 'n permanente gewas is. Op ons laer risiko gronde het ons 'n kort rotasie met koring en canola grootliks. Daardeur kry ons dit reg om 'n continuous cropping stelsel te doen waar ons jaar na jaar kontant gewasse plant sonder 'n rus of 'n oorleeffase.
And the recipe works. Getting wheat yields of up to 3.3 tons per hectare, despite the region's rather challenging climatic conditions, is no mean feat. The livestock side is run by his brother Andre, with merinos for wool and meat production as the primary component. They also farm Brangus cattle for weaner production, and the excellent condition of the animals speaks for itself. To connect the dots between the different divisions, the brothers take time for detailed planning and projections. A lot may have changed since their great-grandfather started out in this historic little house. But the generational love for the area remains rooted.
Ons is in 'n echt plattelandse omgewing, hier in die Albert 10 jaar Wisdal omgewing. Ons is nie ver van die see af nie ver van die berge af nie. Ons bly in 'n baie mooi omgewing. Ander mense werk vir 12 maande van die jaar in ander dele van die land om vir 3 weke van die jaar by ons te kom vakansie hou.
This is how the De Jager family does it, in style, with a vibrancy echoing the new life in the soils.
So David, now we've showcased 2 of our top farmers in the past year, and ek wil aan beide van julle sê, William and the De Jager family, you certainly make us incredibly proud. South African grain farmers are really world class, and thank you for that. Kongres, dan wil ek u herinner, ons het, ek dink is nou 2 jaar terug het ons besluit dat ons kongres ook gaan vra en die nominasiebriewe vir die moontlike graanprodusentkandidaate is vandag beskikbaar. Ek wil vra dat u gedagtes laat gaan daaroor en vir ons die nominasies laat kry sodat ons so wyd as moontlik kan evalueer en ons graanprodusent van die jaar aanwys. Kongres is nou 'n redelike opwindende gedeelte van ons kongres. Ek dink ek is opgewonde en ek verwag dat ons uit vanmiddag se sessie uit heelwat pitkos gaan kry om terug te kan neem huis toe, terug te kan neem plaas toe. And Brand Republic, if you will then play in the introduction video of David O'Sullivan.
David O'Sullivan is a writer and media consultant. David became well known through a 40-year career in broadcasting, mainly on Talk Radio 702. Other radio broadcast activities included Power FM and Kaya FM. He also presented live sport on SABC TV and was carte blanche presenter on the Oscar Pistorius trial. As a writer, he gained fame for writing the book Rassie, the memoir of former Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus. Launched in August 2023, the book has topped the bestseller list. David is a sought-after consultant to corporates on media-related matters, training executives on how to do effective interviews. Congress, please welcome Mr. David O'Sullivan.
Goeiemiddag, dames en heren. Baie dankie vir daai woorde. Jy moet my Afrikaans verskoon asseblief. Ek is eintlik 'n soutie van Joburg af. My vrou is die tweetalige persoon in ons familie. Sy het groot geword in Durbanville. Ek is 'n Suid-Afrikaner. Ek het Afrikaans op skool geleer en in die Vermaak vir 2 jaar. 85 en 86. Dis hoe oud ek is. En wat my bang maak is dat daai Afrikaans was vol vloekwoorde. So ek moet volk baie versigtig wees. Ek koop nie Afrikaanse airtime nie en my Afrikaanse airtime is nou op. I'm going to have to now start speaking English. Quite frankly, when I started working with Rassie on this book, I said to him, because the book is coming out in English and Afrikaans, I had no problems with him speaking Afrikaans. I recorded all of our conversations. Baie dankie, Nico. Nico's younger than me. Nico's 61.
Dis high mileage.
So I said to him, look, speak Afrikaans, and that'll just help the translation process. I can understand things. There's going to be no problem. Not a chance. He spoke English throughout. And so the crazy thing is the book was then translated by somebody else into a language that Rassie was more familiar with, where he could have actually done it all in English. But I think the swear words would have frightened that poor woman who did the translation. Because that's all Rassie does. He just swears constantly. And when you see him on those documentaries and he's swearing like that, you think, is this done for the cameras? Is that done because he's stressed? No, it's his normal way of talking. It is just swearing constantly. But he did tell me two very funny stories about the whole problem with Afrikaans, because he grew up in Dispatch in the Eastern Cape. He's not a Bloemfontein boy. He subsequently ended up in Bloemfontein when he was 18 years old to go to university. Short-lived. But he wasn't a very worldly person, so being exposed to English wasn't something he did. And when he started as a player, his English was incredibly bad. And so there came a time where when they were playing rugby, playing for Free State, a lot of the guys were Afrikaans. And the man of the match interviews were being done in English, and nobody wanted to be man of the match. But there was one guy who was English speaking, Rory Duncan. Those of you who followed Free State rugby closely would remember Rory Duncan. He was English speaking. So for something like 5 games in a row, Rory Duncan was the man of the match. Supersport eventually said, we see what you're doing here, you're going to have to stop. He also told me a story, which that story's in the book. Krainer Otto was a man who loved a challenge, and they were at some function, and the TV cameras were there. And there was a young presenter called Candice Hillebrand, a beautiful young woman, and the players were quite interested, and she wanted to interview one of them. So they were torn now. They wanted to be interviewed by Candice Hillebrand, but they didn't want to speak English. And so Krainer Otto, he decided he was the man for the challenge, and up he went. And all the players gathered round to have a listen. And she said to him as her opening question, what's it like for you when you're standing on the field before a test match and the national anthems come on? And Krainer thought about this for a short while, and he wanted to say, I get goosebumps, which in Afrikaans is hoendervleis. So he did the translation in his head, and he says, no, it's lekker because I get chicken pox. And the English guys roared with laughter, and the Afrikaans guys went koolskoot. I've got some wonderful issues that Rassie raises about the way he does things. And you might say, well, why am I here? Why isn't Rassie here? So the first thing I'm going to tell you, which is the first thing he told me, is that everybody misjudges him. They think that he's a louder than life character, that he is a social butterfly, that he's in the room here, he'd be backslapping everybody, sitting at every table, having a brandewyn and coke, and kuiering, which is his favorite word. Let's kuier. We never kuiered once, because actually that's not what he's like. He is probably the most reserved, shy person I've ever come across. He's socially awkward, and he's only really comfortable in his rugby environment with a small group of rugby players, dealing with them. Doing these kind of functions is an absolute nightmare for him, and so he doesn't do them. And it's such a pity, because corporates are throwing huge amounts of money at him, and he knows his place. He doesn't want to do things like this. He hyper-focuses. He'll hyper-focus on rugby, and that's it. When we wrote the book, he hyper-focused on the book, and that was it. But standing here, doing this, would be killing him inside. And sadly, that's why I'm here, and he's not here. Also, he's far too busy at the moment, because as you might have seen yesterday, he gave a press conference. Another thing that absolutely petrifies him is doing news conferences. It's on the first page of the book, where he says, I am way out of my comfort zone when he does press conferences. I know you're going to ask, so why does he do them? And I'll explain a little bit later. But what he does is he has out-the-box thinking. He's a big advocate on constantly changing things. And once again, he's changed. He hasn't detailed what it is he's changing, but we do know, because he announced them, we've got some new members of the management team. So you'll recall Jacques Nienaber, the head coach, left to go to Leinster. That's because the Nienaber family want to actually, Jacques is keen to get himself an Irish passport and work in Europe. And they fell in love with Ireland when they went to Munster. It was a bit of a wrench for them to come back, as it was for the Erasmus family. So one understands why Jacques has gone. And Felix Jones has gone as well. He's gone to England, and if you've been watching the Six Nations, isn't it interesting to watch how there's a familiarity to their style of play? And you can see it's Felix Jones's fingerprints that are all over it, as they were with the Springboks. So he's brought in Tony Brown, who is the former All Black fly half, and a guy called Jerry Flannery, who Russie worked with. He's the former Irish international. Russie worked, and Jacques worked with him at Munster when they were there for 18 months. So he's brought them both in. And now he says, and now we will start doing things differently. So we can anticipate that the way the Springboks played in 2019 and 2023 is not going to be the same as they play in 2027 at the next World Cup. For the next 4 years, we're going to see a change in their pattern. He's also brought in Jacob Paper, who is retired as a referee, and he's sitting on the refereeing. He comes in as the refereeing advisor. This morning, I was actually in Durban this morning, of all places, doing a talk with Bongi and Bonambi, Oxen Chair, and Eben Etzebeth, and I asked them what it meant to have Jacob Paper there. And Ox was the one who chose to answer the question. He said because the laws of scrumming, mauling, rucking, the things that he has to do are so complicated and open to so much interpretation. Jacob Paper now gives him some kind of uniformity, gives him some level of confidence that the way in which he goes about doing his job is going to be the correct way. And this, again, is something unusual. I don't think there are any other countries, rugby playing nations, as part of their management team that have a former test referee who's part and parcel of the management team, which just talks about the out-of-the-box thinking that Russie has. The thing about Russie is, and I've on my notes here, I've written this word genius, because when I started writing the book, I kept hearing this word genius. When I was telling people that I'm working with Russie, he's a genius, he's a genius. Everybody, I went and sat with Nick Mallett, who was Russie's coach, while for the bulk of his Springbok career. Oh, he's a genius. And I said, but what makes him a genius? And I said to Russie, do you regard yourself as a genius? Can you understand this? He shut me down so fast. Nepal, that's Vingat. That's Haragat. You don't call yourself a genius. He refused to address this issue. He said, if you want to talk about genius, you're going to have to talk to other people, but I'm not telling you that I'm a genius. I'm just a guy from Dispatch, which is incredibly self-deprecating. But the more I worked with him, the more I fleshed it out, the more I understood what it was about Russie is that he saw things differently on the field. Now, I hope that everything I'm saying to you now, in your minds, you can turn a few cogs and work out how you would apply it to your jobs as farmers. I don't understand your industry at all. I admire it enormously. It must be the most difficult job in the world. But you will see, I hope, how these things might work, or not, as the case may be, in your line of work. But the way he explained it to me was that he sees patterns. He sees the opposition moves. I said to him, is it like playing a game of chess, where you anticipate the opposition's next few moves? He said, no, Chom, I see the next 10 moves. So what he is able to do, which so few are able to do, Nas Boerter was also one of these people, he can look up and he can size up where everybody is on the field. He can see where they are moving, and he can then work out 10 moves ahead. He can see what strategy they're about to employ. And instead of going to where the ball is, he goes to where the ball is going to go. which is over there. So he starts running there. And when everybody said, geez, Rassie Erasmus runs so fast, he says, I didn't run fast. He was never the fastest player. He just started a lot earlier. But because on camera, or even when you're in the stadium, you're watching where the ball is. You don't watch the off-the-ball stuff. And that's what he was so good at. The off-the-ball stuff, he would get there before anybody else. Chances are the opposition player got man and ball at the same time because Rassie had figured it out. He said in 1997, Nick Mallett pointed out a particular move where he anticipated an intercept coming, and he just quietly bided his time, and at the critical moment, in he went, flicked the ball to Peter Rousseau, who I think scored 4 tries on that day. All these games on YouTube. And so we had great fun when he would talk about a particular thing, we'd stop, and then we'd go and find the YouTube clip, and he'd relive it. That was quite amusing as well, because he remembered every single move. He knew where every player was. We did this book in 2023. He's remembering stuff in 1997, exactly how it went in his head. There was an incident when the Springboks were playing Australia. This was in 2000. It was actually, as it turned out, Nick Mallett's last game as coach. And Rassie at this stage was also, once again, innovating, doing things that nobody else was doing. He bought himself a laptop and computer software from the CSIR. He was the first private person to own a laptop this powerful and this particular software. When I worked out the amount of money he would have paid today for that equipment, he got quite a fright because it was over R1 million. He had to go and get a bank loan to pay this off. But he got a mate of his who was at the CSIR who was learning coding. And this is in the early days. This is the late 1990s we're talking about here, when nobody's thinking about coding. Only some thin-armed, bespectacled people in the basements of the CSIR knew how to do coding. And there's Rassie Erasmus, this jock rugby player, who's also learning coding, because he wanted to take all the games and then code them so he could analyze the play. And the benefits were this. He says to Nick Mallett, there's a particular move that Australia does where they do a short line out, but they put in Totai Kefu. Do you remember him? He was a big loose forward for Australia. He's a dummy runner. And George Gregan always flicks the ball to Sterling Mortlock at full back. He says, what I should do is I don't mark Totai Kefu. I go for the intercept. And Nick was worried about this. He said, no, you've got to keep an eye on Totai Kefu, because if Totai Kefu gets the ball and gets ahead of steam, he's straight through and he scores a try. He says, Nick, I promise you, I've seen this move in so many games. Totai Kefu never gets the ball. It's a waste of time for me to mark him. So Nick said, what the hell? Let's go for broke. And sure enough, there was that moment. They saw the short line out coming, and Rassie took off like a firecracker had been lit beneath him and got the intercept. And suddenly those players, the Australian players, were on him, but he was through. He wasn't the quickest over 100 meters, but he was quick over 20 meters. And that's all he needed. And he got to the line, dived over. And here was the mad thing about that particular try, is that he dived over, holding the ball underneath his chest, went over, and 3 Australian players jumped on top of him. The referee wasn't expecting this move, so he's way behind. All he can see is that Rassie's gone over. And it was the first time they were using TMOs. And so the ref, Paul Honus, went, oh, here's a good idea. I'm not sure he grounded it because all the other players are there. Have they got their hands underneath? I'll send it up to the TMO. But they didn't have that sophisticated way of analyzing in those days. So he just said to the TMO, can you see if he scored a try? There was none of this, the on-field decision is try or no try. There's a much more analytical way that they do this. He just said, can you see if he scored a try? And the TV coverage couldn't show whether he had scored a try. So the try was disallowed. And Rassie was absolutely furious because this beautiful move had come to naught because he had the ball underneath him. But it was the way in which Rassie coded the game, analyzed the game. He did disco lights, which was quite amusing at this World Cup now, where everybody, particularly the international media, was saying, what the hell's going on here? What are these disco lights? And the journalists maybe did not know Rassie as a coach in the early 2000s at Free State. I'm sure there are plenty of you here who remember what Rassie did. It started off with him getting rather annoyed with the players not understanding what they should be doing, taking wrong options. So they said, but Rassie, you should tell us then. You should give us some input. So he said, okay, fine, let's work it out. If it's from a line out, if we have a move that's green, which means it goes to the fly half or kicks it out. We have a move that is blue, which means you run it down. And we have a move which is white, which is maul it up. And then he would hold up one of those little field markers, training cones. He'd hold them up. So the players would get to a line out, and then they'd be going, what color is that cone? And they'd have a discussion about color of the cone. They realize, okay, that's not great. So they made these paddles and had these colors. And then the opposition players were going, okay, what did that color mean? And they were trying to figure it out. So Rassie started writing random numbers on the paddles. And then they would shout, green 756. Like, oh, 756, that must mean something. It meant nothing. It was just the color. But again, the players were going, we can't quite see because we're on the far side. They're going, oh, we can't actually see what color it is. So Rassie then got disco lights. He went to the shop, bought disco lights, and he put them on the roof at Free State Stadium, one side and the other side. And the players looked up, and he flicked a switch, and they knew exactly what they needed to do. It went awry on one particular occasion when the Bulls came to town, and they said, do you mind if we use the stadium for captain's run on the Friday? And Harold Verster, who was the boss of Free State Rugby in those days, said, knock yourselves out. You can use the stadium, no problem. Next day, it's game time, and it's time for the lights to come into action, and the players all look up, and Rassie's flicked a switch, and the move that he has then illuminated makes absolutely no sense. So they're going, what? To the coach's box, what's going on? And Rassie's flicking the switch, it's blue, you go blue, and they're going, we can't do blue, not from this position. And then they realized what had happened was the Bulls players had got up onto the roof and changed all the light bulbs around. He got himself a mobile disco unit because obviously he could only use the lights in Bloemfontein. But he wanted to use them at all the away games as well. So they bought a mobile disco unit, which they then installed, and they were at Loftus of all places. And they rigged it all up, and they were ready to go. And as the ref blew the whistle, so the power in the coach's box went out. Only that box lost its power. And Rassie said, you know what? If I had been the Bulls, I would have done exactly the same thing. So then he got a battery backup. They could never thwart his disco lights. I said to him, why didn't you take it down to the Stormers when he went to Cape Town, coached there for a while? He said, nah, those guys, they're too busy surfing and going to wine farms. They're not interested in my disco lights. But he decided then to take them to the World Cup. I was amused when Jacques was challenged about it. And they said, aren't you taking away responsibility from the players? Aren't you impinging on the independence of the captain and removing the power to make their own decisions from the players? And Jacques said, no. It's to communicate with the medical staff. When we think a player maybe needs to go for a head injury assessment, then we shine the light. No, it wasn't. It was to show them when to kick, when to run, when to maul. It was exactly the same thing. But it was, again, the out-of-the-box thinking that worked so well. It won a World Cup. He didn't use it in 2019. When he used it at Free State, it won 2 Curry Cups. It's a system that worked absolutely right. The thing about Rassie is that none of the stuff that he does when it comes to out-of-the-box thinking is something that he's read in a book. And I can safely say that nothing of his tactical abilities, his interaction with people, the way he motivates, I can safely say none of it comes from a book. And the reason I know this is when he first started working with me, we started at my house in Johannesburg, in my study, and I've got one wall, books. I love books. I read books voraciously, and so I've got this big bookshelf. And he walked into the study, he looked at the bookcase, and then looked at me with, you know that look when you're going, what a load of bullshit this is? He goes, hey pal, chum is his word, chum, how many of these books have you read? And I said, well, I've read them all. That's why they're here. I mean, it's like 40 years of collecting. He goes, well, now you're going to judge me because I've never read a book in my life. And I looked at him, he said, no, sorry. I've read one book in my life. When I was at school, I read Lord of the Flies. And that's the only book he's ever read. I said to him, Russ, well, by the end of this, you're going to have read 2 books because you're going to have to read your own book because you have to actually tell me if there's anything you need to take out or add or if I've got anything wrong. And he phoned me after the first manuscript was done, and I'd emailed it to him, and he phoned me in great excitement. He said, hey, Chom, I've read 2 books. I was delighted. When the book came out and he could hold it in his hand, he phoned me again. He said, Chom, I read the book, now holding the actual book. I said, Russ, you've read 3 books now. But it was confirmed by Jacques, who said he was once in a session with Russie. And Russie, he loves doing things on the flip chart and the whiteboard and his own computer. Excel. He just has spreadsheets and spreadsheets as he's analyzing all the time. Data, loves that stuff. But he was drawing something about player management. And Jacques, who's got a diploma in some, I think, business management or something, he was looking at what Russie was doing, and he was saying, you know what? This is from module 3 in term 2. He says, goes up to me, he says, Russ, where did you read all this? He goes, John, it comes from my head. It doesn't come from a book. And that's what makes that man so unusual. But he also knows his limitations. Why he's not here. But as a rugby player, he knew how far he could push the envelope. And when Nick Mallett said to him in 1999, they were playing Italy, and the incumbent captain then was Gary Teichmann. He was injured. Andre Vos had been a captain, and he was injured. And they were in Italy, and Nick Mallett said to him, listen, you're captaining the Cats, you've captained Free State, I want you to be the Springbok captain, thinking that Russie would say, well, this is one of the greatest honors of my life. It's something I'd always dreamed of. And he looked at Nick and said, nah, I'm not ready for it. I'm nowhere near capable of doing it. He was actually going through a time there when he said he partied too hard. He was irresponsible. He said, I wasn't the right person for the job. And I wonder if he isn't the first person ever to turn down the Springbok captaincy. Nick offered it to him on a second occasion. He turned it down flat, but Nick said it was half-hearted. And there was on one occasion where they were in Australia, and everybody was injured. And Nick said, now you don't have any choice. You can't say no. You are the captain because I have nobody else. So if you look in Russie's record, sure, Springbok captain, tick, it's there. But he only did it under duress because there was nobody else for the job. But he knows his limitations, and he turns down something as prestigious as that. But if you want the greatest indication of thinking out the box, then it's the incident for which Russie became notorious around the world, and the incident for which Russie now has a certain amount of regret. I'll take you back to the British and Irish Lions tour as we came out of COVID. We'd played the first test in front of an empty stadium, and Russie couldn't understand what Nick Berry, the ref, had been doing, how he had been interpreting the laws. So what happens after test matches is they assemble a whole lot of clips from the game, they have their own cameras, get their own footage, and they submit the video clips to the refs, to the referees panel, to a guy called Joel Jut, who's the boss of test referees, to say, can you please give us some guidance on why this was a penalty or why this was allowed, so that when we coach the players in the week to come, in the build-up for the next test, we know what we're doing. And the video clips went off on the Sunday. And by Sunday evening, there was no reply. Now, Rassie has this policy. On Monday, it's a full training session. Players who are injured, who can't play on Monday, don't train on Monday, don't play on Saturday. But it's a full training session, and he wanted the answers. He wanted to know, how do I train them, to make sure we don't make those same mistakes for the second test. Still no answers. Now it's Tuesday. He wants to pick his team, but he doesn't know, do I need to replace anybody? There are still no answers. So by Wednesday, he's now so angry, he makes the now notorious Erasmus video, where he talks the referees through all of the problems. You might well have seen this notorious video. It got leaked to the media, and I'll explain how that happened as well. It was only then that Joel Jut opened his eyes and went, oh my goodness, we're actually going to have to do something, and they got the feedback they wanted. But Rassie was incensed. He said, we're being treated like a third world country. They're treating us like they're second cousins, that they don't care about us. We're living in this country where there's load shedding, where we have all these problems. And he was really depressed about the state of the economy, and he says, and they know and they don't care, and so he was absolutely furious. But in the end, the refs woke up. They understood the predicament, and after that, there was a proper process for the understanding of feedback and the importance of giving the Springboks feedback. So it worked. However, that video got into the public domain. It was leaked in some way, and Rassie was accused of having leaked it. I think I got to know him well enough to say I believe him when he says he didn't do it, because there was nothing for him to gain and so much for him to lose. He did gain because Joel Jut and the other referees, Ben O'Keefe, the Frenchman Reynal, and Nick Berry, they were the three refs in South Africa for that British and Irish Lions tour. But so they acted upon it. But the vitriol and the reputational damage that he did to himself, World Rugby was very, very angry about this. And so they had a disciplinary inquiry. And in that disciplinary inquiry, we only got the judgment. We didn't get the argument. But his lawyer, Frikkie Erasmus, no relation, gave me all of the forensic analysis, which shows how the video got out into the public domain. And the way it worked was this. He sent the video to 5 people, the referees, all of them referees, and, it'll have been 6, and to Yuri Roo, who was the CEO of SA Rugby at the time. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with these things. I certainly wasn't. My mate was actually the videographer, and I got him to explain it to me. He uploads it to a platform called Vimeo, and he can see how the video is being viewed, who's watching it, and where they're watching it. So as he sent it off, he noticed immediately that the video, after 24 minutes, was sent to Brisbane. Now, the video itself was over 40 minutes long, around about 40 minutes. So the person who sent it to Brisbane hasn't actually watched the entire video. Now, who lived in Brisbane? Nick Berry, the referee who was the target of the attack. And as it turned out, when they subpoenaed his emails to have a look at what happened, he had sent it on to his agent, not through malice, not to provoke a storm, not to cause trouble or anything like that, simply for his agent to know this is what is going on in South Africa. And then his agent said, oh, sent it to a mate, who sent it to a mate, and then it just explodes. And that's where they lose contact with it. They can't then say who sent it to a media person. So I can say unequivocally, it wasn't Rassie, but the man who inadvertently released that video was the man who suffered the slings and arrows of Rassie's. Now, I'm misquoting Shakespeare there, aren't I? It was the man who bore the brunt of the attack. But it's the how to do things differently scenario. And now, as a result of the Erasmus video, Rassie and the referees get on famously, to the extent that he brings in Jaco paper. Let me talk to you about, well, I think I've done the second one. I was going to talk about innovating and the way he constantly innovates, so I can actually cross that off. Let me talk to you about the way he handles rugby. He's called the director of rugby. He's also the head coach now. Now, I don't think Rassie wants to be the head coach. He never said so, so I'm just going to give you my view on this one. Because when you think about it, he was playing for Free State and he had to give up his rugby playing career because he was badly injured. He had an undiagnosed foot injury, a broken bone in his foot, and he played with this broken bone in his foot for a number of years. Every time he went for x-rays, they couldn't pick up this hairline crack. So the way he played was pumped full of painkillers. And an amusing aside is he realized that the his painkilling injection wore off too quickly for him. So he went back to the doctor and said, "Can you give me another jab?" And the doctor said, no, it's too much. You're going to have to wait a certain number of hours before I can give you another injection. But his wife is a nurse, qualified nurse. In fact, she was the matron of one of the big hospitals. So he said to her, "Listen, Nikki, the doctor says you must give me my painkiller injection." So she said, "Oh, okay." So he was getting his wife to inject him and the doctor to inject him, but neither knew. So now the doctor had said to him, which he had remembered, that there was a danger of hitting the same injection hole. So he'd have to say, "Where did I inject you last time?" and point. They'd have to mark where it was. Because if they hit it the second time, I don't understand the medical science of this, you'd get an infection. So he had to always remember which cheek, because he got it in his bum. Which cheek had the doctor done, then Nicky must do the other cheek. And he had to keep remembering this. He said it caused him such anxiety. And of course, as luck would have it, somebody hit the same hole, he got an infection. But he got an infection that was so bad, it turned into an abscess. And he couldn't, he said his whole bum was painful to touch. He had to sleep on his stomach. He couldn't sit down. When he was in a ruck or a mall and somebody touched his bum, he said it was like a jolt of electricity had gone through him. He was in absolute agony and he had to come clean and say, "Look, I've got this huge problem." Went off for surgery. They cleaned this abscess out and he was left with a hole in his bum. So, like an idiot, while he's telling me this whole story, I said to him, "So do you have a circular scar on your bum?" The next thing, he's standing now I'm sitting down, he's standing next to me and he's got his pants down like this, and he's showing me, and I've got Rassie's bare bum, well, just one cheek exposed. He says, "Can you see it?" And I go, "Whoa," and I kind of look, I go, all I can see, and bizarrely, he's got his daughter's names tattooed on his bum. So I said, "No, I can just see your daughter's names." He goes, "Oh, wrong cheek." And he turns around. Now he's got his pants puddled around his ankles, and he's got his bum like this. And I thought, this is where my wife walks in. And thank God she didn't. I'll go back to sorry, that was a hell of a detour I took right there. Because of that foot injury, he retired from rugby and was immediately offered the job of head coach of the Cheetahs. He took it because he had nothing else. His twins had been born. He needed had to keep the wolf from the door. So he took the position. But he only lasted 2 years because he didn't enjoy being the head coach. And the director of coaching at Western Province came up. He applied for it and got it. But very quickly, he was brought in to be a coach, which he absolutely hated. And he told the story of how he was constantly having to work with the politics of Western Province rugby. So, for example, he'd get a phone call from Skalkberger Senior. He'd say, "You must pick my son, Skalk, at number 6. Then Cheeky Watson would phone him and say, "You've got to pick my son, Luke, at number 6. And then Jan Bull Pickard, this famous old Springbok, phoned him and said, "You must pick my grandson, Francois Lowe, at number 6. And by the way, all three of them said, and you must make him captain. So he had these three people who had nothing to do with Western Province Rugby as far as administration was concerned or coaching, felt that they could phone him and tell him what to do. And it was one of the reasons he wanted to walk away from it. So the way he resolved it was, Schalk was at 6, Francois was at 7, Luc was at 8, Jean de Villiers was the captain. That's the way he dealt with the situation. But he didn't stay as the head coach. He left and he joined the South African Rugby Union as he ran a mobile coaching clinic. So he and Jacques and Sean Roux and a number of other coaches would travel around the country, and they were like, if you remember a TV show called The A-Team, where these mercenaries would go into wherever there was a trouble spot and they would solve the problem. That's what they were doing. And in fact, it was at the Moby unit where one day they saw this youngster playing, who was, he said he was like a mongrel with a bone. And they said to the coach of Border, "Who's that guy?" He said, his name's Makazola Mapimpi, but he's very fast, but he can't pass left and right, and his kicking's terrible. And they made a training program, and they said, "We think he's got something special. Make sure he works on these skills." Look what happened next. Lukanya was also spotted by them as they were in the Moby unit. Rassie then wanted to become the director of rugby at SA Rugby. But the problem was SA Rugby didn't understand this position. They thought it meant a board, somebody who sat on the board of directors, who was an accountant. And so they said, no, they don't need this position. And Rassie, fed up, decided that his fortunes lay elsewhere, and he applied for jobs in England and in Ireland, and he went for interviews. And Munster were the first to come back and say, "We appoint you director of rugby at Munster." And he phoned Jacques and said, "Come, let's go." He'd been to Limerick, the town where Munster is based. He said, "It's just like Bloemfontein." And off they went. He was there for 18, he was there for 18 months, yeah, but he was there for 1 month, and as director, the head coach was a guy, a wonderful guy, former Irish player and former Munster legend, called Anthony Foley, or Axel Foley was his nickname. And they were playing a game against Racing 92, so they were in Paris. And Axel Foley hadn't come down from breakfast to the training session. And Rassie said, "Could somebody go and check on him, because I think he's died." And they said, "Why would you say something like that?" He said, "Oh my God, I'm not quite sure, but I just have this feeling that he's died." And they went up to Axel Foley's room, and he had died. He had had a pulmonary edema. Fluid had gathered in his lung and had provoked a heart attack. And so Axel Foley died. It was the most shocking start to his time at Munster. And then they said, "What are we going to do with this? How are we going to manage?" And they did what they called the coaching matrix, where Rassie became the head coach, but he designated lines of responsibility to all the other coaches, so that he wasn't the only coach. He had a lot of coaches, but he retained some form of control where they reported to him. His aim, though, as director of rugby, was to deflect everything from the coach. All the politics, all the media, all the hype, all the contracts, everything like that is handled by the director of rugby. And so the coach just coaches. And he's oblivious to all the noise that goes on around him. As head coach, obviously, it's a lot more difficult. But by devolving power to the other coaches and giving them specific fields of responsibility, the burden on him as head coach is somewhat lessened. And that's what he wanted to do. Frikkie Erasmus, his lawyer, came to visit him in Limerick and said, "Listen, SA Rugby is starting to change their tune." Alistair Coetzee was the coach at the time. You can remember how badly we were doing in those days. We hardly had a sponsor. We were dropped to 7th in the world. And so SA Rugby said, "We need to do something." And they were prepared to entertain Rassie's idea, and the deal was done. Reluctantly, his family came back. Reluctantly, Jacques and his family came back as well. And Rassie came in as director of rugby, not as head coach. Alistair Coetzee was still the head coach. But when Alistair Coetzee heard the new reporting structures, he said, "Not a chance," and he resigned. And suddenly Rassie found himself in a predicament where he had to, once again, do the job he didn't want to do, be the head coach. We were 2 years out from the World Cup, and he decided to go for it, won the World Cup, and stepped away because he doesn't want the job. Now, once again, Jacques has decided to go to Leinster. Russie's having to fill the void. But just to give you an indication of how much power and responsibility the other coaches have, do you remember in the World Cup, Damien Willemse at one stage, and I forgot, against France, Damien Willemse took a mark and then did that, called for a scrum. And everybody went, what the hell? Are you allowed to do that? And they said, it's Rassie. It's the out-of-the-box thinking. Actually, it wasn't. It was Mzwandile Stick, who's the off-the-ball coach. Now, I don't think in any other rugby team of the international teams, they have an off-the-ball coach. Once again, the innovation of Rassie, understanding you've got to look where the ball isn't and direct the players in that regard. And Stick was the guy who said, you know, when you play France, you'll get maybe 3 or 4 scrums a game. Those props, they never put under pressure. They're always as fresh as a daisy. We've got to get more scrums, and we've got to make them run around a lot more. So the way to do that was to get them trundling from wherever if they'd done a big booming kick, the props, the forwards would just stay camped in the opposition, in their own 22, expecting, as would so often happen, the ball to be peppered straight back at them, except suddenly they were being called, no, get down to the opposition's 22, it's scrum time. But when Stocker, as he's known, when Stocker raised this, they said, we're not sure we can do this. So they phoned Jaco Paper, who was one of the referees, and said, can we do this? He said, look, I don't think so, but I'm going to have to research it, and I'm having dinner this evening with the other referees. I'll ask. On the day of the game, that would have been Ben O'Keefe, was the referee, and he came into the dressing room to have a chat to the props. It's a normal thing the refs do, just to talk about how he wants them to scrum so they don't have to explain it all on the field. And Jacques said to him, oh, by the way, if we take a mark in our 22, we're not going to go for a kick, we're going to scrum. And Ben O'Keefe said, oh, isn't that interesting? We were talking about that at supper last night. They went, we know what you were doing. But that's the power that Rassie's given the other coaches, so you've got that innovative thinking all along. I've done another heading here called Sticking with Your Plan. If you're going to make your plan, you've got to stay with it. And so there's Rassie. He changes his plans because he understands things are changing. Rugby's evolving. You've got to evolve with the times. But once he's made his plan, he sticks with it. And here's a great example of that having happened. In 2018, when he took over, he and Jacques took over, South African rugby was in the doldrums, as you may recall. And the first real test was a 3-test series against England. We played what they call a moneymaker test against Wales in Washington. They picked a team that included 11 debutants, shipped them off, and said, right, here's the main team that's going to play, and here's what we're going to do. They had this new captain in Sia Kolisi. I'm going to do a quick detour and tell you how he picked Sia as his captain. If you think that it was done because to fill some kind of quota, think again. Here's the way it came about. Rassie picked his team. He had worked with Sia since Sia was 17 years old. He knew exactly what he was capable of, and he was playing great rugby at the time. He was the best number 7 for his team. He put his name down, went for his list. He said, right, I need to find a captain. Who's the previous captain? It was Herman. Oh, Herman's injured. Who else can captain? He looks at his list. Dwayne. But Dwayne plays in France. Didn't feel it was right to have somebody coming from overseas to be the captain. And then he went, oh, look at that, Sia. The other thing is he wants a player who's near the referee at scrum time. So it's got to be a prop, a hooker, a scrum half, or a loose forward. That's who he wants as his captain. And he looked and went, oh, that ticks all of my boxes. Sia's the captain. He announced it to the team. The team all clapped. Thank you very much. It was only when he went to Mark Alexander, the president of the South African Rugby Union, and said, oh, there's the team, by the way, Sia's the captain. And Mark Alexander's head exploded and said, do you realize that's the first time we've got a black captain? Rassie genuinely had absolutely no idea. is almost politically naive in that sense. He did not know it, and it makes him incandescent with rage when people say, you picked Sear because you are doing the bidding of your political paymasters. The only reason he did it because he liked Sear. Sear could do the job for him. When they played England, he'd also picked up Piwe Janchi and Spoon Corsi on his wings. He'd been tracking their movements for a very long time. And there was a new defense pattern that Jacques had come up with, which required these wingers to make critical decisions, tackling in, not using the touchline as your last line of defense. Within 17 minutes, England were up 24-3, and the game plan was falling apart. And Jacques said, we're going to have to go back to the old plan. And Rassie said he went through an absolute agony, but he felt if he did that, he would lose the confidence and trust of the players. So his answer was, go harder. And that was the word that was communicated to the players. Carry on with what you're doing, but go harder. And if you watch that game again, in the 20th minute, so 3 minutes after England had gone 24-3 up and the message go harder had come, 20th minute, Spoon Corsi gets the ball, powers down the wing. He doesn't use the touchline as a line of defense. 3 players have to tackle him. Fuff gets the recycled ball, scores a try. And so the momentum was built. And once the first opportunity had been seized upon, the players grew in confidence. Spoo scored a try. Willie scored a try. Half-time it was 29-7. Eventually the Boks won 42-39. And that was only, I mean, it sounds quite close, but it was because England scored a try right on the whistle. It would have been 42-32, actually. But it was that whole thing of sticking with the plan, never abandoning the plan. I've got 3 minutes left to talk about transformation. You know, Nico, I didn't actually follow my own time. I don't know what time it is.
That's fine. Go.
Okay, because I know people might want to talk about questions. Let me tell you about transformation. The guiding principle of Rassie's transformation is that transformation is there's Nico down over there. It's never a case of white out, black in. And here's why he doesn't want that. When he was playing for the Cats, Laurie Mains, the New Zealander, who had coached the All Blacks in the 1995 World Cup final and claimed that a waitress had poisoned the players, he was now the captain of the coach of the Cats. And very crude quotas were imposed on the teams. Laurie Mains didn't understand the nuances of South African politics, South African society. He was quite bombastic in this regard. And what he did was, with Rassie as his captain, he went to Conrad Janchis, who I think must be the most prodigiously talented sportsman ever to come out of South Africa, because at junior level he played international cricket, rugby, and football. He could have chosen any sport he liked. And if he hadn't twisted his ankle at CBC Boksburg on the first day of soccer practice, which became his chosen sport, then realized he had to sit out and was only fit again when rugby season started, he wouldn't have played rugby. He would have played for Bafana Bafana. He was a massively talented player, but he was colored. And Laurie Mains decided that Conrad Janchis wasn't good enough. And he said to Conrad, I'm going to pick you in my starting team because I have to in terms of the quota. But after 7 minutes, you're going to fake an injury, and Dean Hall is going to come on in your place. And Rassie, as the captain, looked at this, and he saw the embarrassment in Dean Hall's eyes and the humiliation in Conrad Janchis' eyes. For Rassie, it's a big thing about looking at people's eyes. Even yesterday at the news conference, he was talking about, I look in their eyes. He looks at people's eyes and he gauges what they're doing. And he remembered humiliation and embarrassment from when he was young. His father was an alcoholic. In a tiny town like Dispatch, everybody knew that Abel Erasmus was a drunk, that he was an alcoholic, and nobody would help them. And he was embarrassed all the time. He didn't want his friends coming round to his house because they would see his father with his what do you call it, the mainstay bottles, Blokop Soldaikis, because of the blue tops, holding his bottle of mainstay and his boop hanging out, sitting in his underpants watching TV and then falling asleep. He remembered the humiliation and the embarrassment. And so he said, I will never be in put in a situation where that happens ever again. And he realized the way you do transformation is you start it at a very early stage. You develop players. And his idea of transformation is about giving opportunities to people who wouldn't have got them, and giving them the tools to seize the opportunities. And then you stand back, because then it's up to that person to seize the opportunity. So what they started doing is they implemented a program called the Elite Players Development Pathway, which is Russie's greatest achievement, the thing that he's most proud of. If ever you meet him, don't ask him, what was it like to win the World Cup? Say to him, Russie, tell me about the EPD. And then he's your pal for life. That's when he's saying, kom, ons kuier. We're going to sit down. He spent hours upon hours telling me about the EPD. When I got to the section of the book where we're now talking about what's his legacy, and I'm thinking I'm going to have a discussion about winning the World Cup, and he goes, no, chum, it's about the EPD. That's his greatest joy. So the way it worked was this. They would identify through a network of coaches and scouts around the country, at club level, school level, in the rural areas, at the prestigious schools. And everybody would be looking for that diamond, the rough diamond, the coal that is going to become the diamond. And they would give them training programs, training manuals that Moby unit, Jacques and him, because this is Russie's favorite thing, to draw up training manuals and do roadmaps, as he calls them, where he checks the skills level. So if you're a 15-year-old, you've got to achieve the following skills. And when you're 16, you have got to have progressed to these skills. And by 17, we want you to be able to do this, and by 18, that. And so it's all marked out every time. The responsibilities are given to the players. The diet, the training programs, the education. And if a player like Makazola Mapimpi is at a terrible school, give him, well, actually a better example might be Cheslin Colby. Give him the opportunities. He's at Kraaifontein Hoërskool. What kind of education is he getting? What kind of skills are being developed there? What needs to be given to that school to ensure that he gets the level of education and rugby and academic that will turn him into a great player? And every year they would sit down and they would map out the 3 best players of each of those positions. And if he had white guy, black guy, white guy, they'd move on. Black guy, white guy, move on. White guy, white guy, they'd go, hold on, find a black guy who's on the fringes and let's keep a special eye on him, because we are about transformation. But it's not white out, black in. Never is white out, black in. He says, sure as anything, in a few years' time, one of those white players will not achieve, and the black player will have achieved, and then it's a natural progression to put the black player in. But those weren't teams that were being selected for anything. It was just for their own guidance, to make sure that their systems were working correctly. And when you look at the players who've come through the Elite Players Development Pathway, more and more of those people are now starting to play franchise or URC rugby, international rugby as well. That's how transformation worked. Quotas were never the answer for him. It was all about depth. It was making sure that you'd always have 2 senior players with 1 junior player pushing hard. And when it came to picking his side for the World Cup in 2019 and again for 2023, he never once looked and counted how many black players I've got, how many white players I've got. He just knew he had the best. Sorry, I'm going to correct myself. He knew he had the right players, because that's another one of his big mantras. It's not about choosing the best players, it's choosing the right players. And he always knew he had the right players. I was looking at the footage of him doing the jersey presentation just before the World Cup final now in 2023. And he makes and I hope it's in the documentary, in Chasing the Sun, where he says, I look at this team, you guys are the right players. No politician has phoned me to challenge me on my team. I'm probably running way over time. Have we got a few minutes to take a couple of calls? See, that's my radio. Call now. 011 8830 702. Lines are open. Are there any questions? There should be a microphone somewhere. If anybody's got a question.
Sure, Congress, use your opportunity there.
Anybody for anyone? Or grab me at the Brian. I'll talk to you then. Nobody with any questions? Have I answered everything? In that case, thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for listening, everybody.
David, just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much for coming to share with us. And we look forward to sharing this evening with you.
Thank you, sir.
Congres, ek is seker dat julle almal sal kan onthou wat 'n vreugde ons as 'n nasie ervaar het toe ons Springbokke daai wêreldbeker gewen het. En ek sit nou vanmiddag aandagtig en luister na wat David met ons gedeel het, presies hoe dit gewerk het. En dan kan julle met reg nou almal van ons vra nou, wat op aarde het julle die man nou gekry om met ons as boere te kom praat en waar maak jy die verbintenis? Nou, ons sit in ons span ongelooflike mense. En Dirk Strydom het tydens die Desember vakansie het hy David se boek gelees of Rassie se boek gelees. En hy het teruggekom en hy het met sy kollegas kom deel. En hy het dit wat hy gelees het en dit wat hy gehoor het en dit wat ons vanmiddag hier gehoor het hy getrek na Graan SA toe, na dit wat ons moet doen, dit wat ons as organisasie moet doen. En dit was een van die eerste goed wat Tobias met ons gedeel het, toe die dagbestuur weer by mekaar kom, en die hoofbestuur ook toe later by mekaar kom. Is daar die insigte wat hulle gekry het uit 'n boek, uit daai vreugde wat ervaar is as 'n nasie, as Suid-Afrika, toe die Springbokke gewen het. En die parallel wat getrek was, die lyn wat getrek was, die verbinding wat gemaak word, is dit. Ons as organisasie, Graan SA as organisasie, ons moet soos Rassie en sy kollegas, sy span mense, die omgewing aan die buitekant, aan die randjies, in die paviljoene, daai omgewing, ons moet beheer neem oor daai omgewing. Ons moet daai omgewing beïnvloed, sodat ons produsente, die spelers op sy plaas, elke individuele boer op sy eie plaas, die spelers bemagtig is om die beste moontlike spel te speel, om die beste moontlike resultaat op sy plaas te kry. En dis die parallel wat ons trek met dit wat ons lees by en may we be able to bring as much joy and success to our members as what Rassie brought to us as a nation. Thank you very much for your presentation, David. Okay, Nico has an election announcement, 'n verkiesingsaankondiging. Nico, asseblief.
Chairperson, thank you. We are closing the nominations for the additional member to the executive for the hoofbestuur. Can I ask, is there any indication, any additional nomination letter that must be added? Can you please indicate from my right to my left? If not, then that nomination process is now closed, Chair, and then I can go straight announcing that the nomination committee confirmed that they received 2 valid nominations. Now we've got an interesting playing field, if I can use the gist of David. Only the developing producers, irrespective of region, can vote between these 2 persons. And can I ask, Lumai, Andre, can you please put alphabetically the names of the 2 persons on the board? And what will happen now? Only the developing producers will be able to vote using our BlackBerry device, BlackBerry look-alike device. So, I'm going to call currently the vote open, and if you are one of the commercial producers, you may see the names, but if you submit, it will not recognize you. So this is limited to our developing producers. So, Chair, at this stage, I'm going to open the vote.
No, can the delegates introduce themselves?
Can you ask them? Please. Yes. Chair, we've got a request. Can the two candidates introduce themselves? We are going to ask Mr. Diketsing to come to the front and introduce himself, to explain where he's farming, and then to Patrick. But we are working alphabetically at this stage, so Mr. Diketsing, can you please come to the front and just give an overview of where you are farming and your business, please.
Mrs. Miss Diketsing.
It's a Miss Diketsing. My apologies. Okay.
You're welcome. You're welcome, please.
Good afternoon, farmers. My name is Deketsing Mahlelehlele. I'm a farmer in Brunford, Lejaliputa district. I'm a livestock farmer. I farm with beef cattle, bonsmaras, and Doni Merino sheep. I'm also a grain farmer. I planted sunflower and some maize this year. Thank you very much. Would highly appreciate your votes. Thank you.
Farmers, what you see is democracy in action. Ms. Diketsing, thank you very much. Can I call Patrick to the front, our second candidate? Can you, Patrick?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and greetings to everyone. My name is Patrick Motlalipula Stirman from the Eastern Cape Region 33. I'm farming with grain production, and I'm also doing Doni Merino production. So I'm doing mixed farming in my farm. So I'm currently serving the Grain SA Executive Committee and also serving on the same position that we are contesting, but also serving in the farmer development Pahama as one of the developing farmers. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And all the developing farmer regions, you've heard your candidates. It's time to make your vote. Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just confirm? You will use a 1, 2, or 3, and if one of the commercial guys try to vote, you'll see not registered to vote. So if I can call all our developing producers, irrespective of regions, please submit your vote. I'm going to give you some time, and then I'm going to say we are closing the votes now. Please proceed.
Okay, Congres, terwyl die produsente in daai streke stem, gaan ons vir Tobias vra om vir ons die volgende vraag op die skerm te bring. Laat ons dit afhandel asseblief. Tobias?
Derek, let the one happen. Not
Sorry?
concurrent. Those are focusing. Just give them a chance.
Okay, all right, we wait and we wait for the farmers to finish.
Thank you, Chair. Can I have a countdown? Mickey say all the votes is in. All the registered developing farmers' votes are in. So we can proceed. Excellent. You would have noticed no result on the board, as the result goes straight to the IT team and the election committee. They verify the votes and they will then communicate to us, and they indicate they've got a quorum, they've got a legal vote. So I'm awaiting the election committee's result. And Chairperson, over to you and Tobias to ask some questions on the other device. Thank you.
Thank you. Tobias, you can go ahead.
Chair, on the other device, we're just going to do, sorry, Andre, if I can be, do we have that percentage of the previous question? I know I'm really putting you on the spot there. Quite interested to know it's the next one on the percentage of the subsidy required on interest rates, sorry, insurance rate. So Daniel and Andries and Pascal from Land Bank Insurance Companies. You can see there's a 50%. We'll probably make it work. Good. What you will see next on your screens, guys, is just an evaluation of the Congress. We're not gonna show that on screen. It is just for our feedback purposes, and we'll continue with this tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Are we going to go through questions now then, Tobias?
Just the one.
Okay.
One word to summarize the first day.
That's quite a challenge, one word. The whole day's discussion in one word.
Some people are using the word housing.
Okay, Congress, we move on. And John Deere Financials sponsor our dinner with Absa. And at this point in time, we're going to ask Abrie Rautenbach, head of Absa Agribusiness, to come to the podium to address us. Please, Abrie.
Goeiemiddag. Ek moet net sê een ding sê, ek wil begin deur te sê dat hierdie kongres is vir my nogal altyd baie spesiaal op die kalender. Ek dink terug aan 2020, wat dit seker die laaste aktiwiteit wat 'n ou mense bymekaar gekry het, voor COVID ingeskop het. So ek dink 'n ou is onmiddellik dankbaar vir die geleentheid en die samesyn. En dan onthou ek ook vir oom Callie Skooman en die Chief Justice en 'n sweep wat hier in die saal geklap was. En ek het gedink, laat dink aan iets in die Bybel, die oopgaan van die see wat die Israeliete deurgetrek het. Want oom Callie het hom baie mooi geklap, maar ek was seker iemand gaan raak geslaan word daai dag. Ek dink ook, dan wil ek net gou in sy afwesigheid net vir Pieter dankie sê vir die tyd wat ons saam met hom kon gewerk het. Ons wil ook net vir Tobias baie welkom heet en sê ons sien uit om saam met Tobias en die Graan SA span te werk. Ek dink die tema van die kongres is rondom wat laat 'n ou wakker lê. Ek dink definitief aan waar ons is en na die industrie kyk, dink ons dit gaan 'n harder jaar wees. Ons dink kontantvloeibeplanning gaan ongelooflik belangrik wees hierdie jaar. Ons regtige dit gaan rondom tydsberekening, praat met jou bankier of jou finansierder, as daar enige iets nie volgens plan verloop op hierdie stadium nie. Dit help nie die oues te laat in die proses nie, doen dit eerder vroegtydig. En dan net die laaste, wat ek kan sê, is die banke het baie geleer uit COVID. So dit sal nie die eerste krisis wees, of die eerste siklus, wat 'n ou moet trotseer nie, as 'n bank, en ons het ook die finansiële krisis in 2008 getrotseer. So praat asseblief met jou bankier vroegtydig, maak hom deel van die plan. Samewerking is definitief belangrik. Baie dankie.
Baie dankie, Abrie. Nico, aankondiging asseblief.
We believe there's a great future in this country, and we're excited about agribusiness. We're excited about what's happening in South Africa, and we've seen with the right partners, there's definitely a future. My name's Kevin Travis. We're standing here at Spiff Chickens, located in Mokgopong, which used to be Naarden in the Limpopo province of South Africa. Spiff Chickens was started the early 1990s by three brothers, Pieter, Isak and Fred, and they were together in the business. So in 1997, they wanted to get out of the poultry industry, and Our family got involved with Spiff Chickens. So since 1997, this has been a family-owned and operated agribusiness. Sustainability is critically important. I think sustainability and responsibility go hand in hand. You've got to be responsible. You've got to build for the future. You've got to always have the future in mind. No business is an island. No business can operate in a bubble. And what we do in our business will impact on other businesses. For Spiff Chicken to be sustainable, we needed to have certainty. So what we did is we started looking at renewable options, and solar just made logical sense. We looked at our electricity consumption, and we were able to do the calculations. You look at how long solar plant will be standing here. We could also justify it as an expenditure for the long term. Also reliability. We need to make sure that we have a reliable supply of electricity going forward. And with solar, we know that we can have that reliable source. Going forward, definitely as we expand our operations, we'll expand on the solar side as well. When we embarked on the renewable energy process, we knew that we had to get reliable supplier to provide the services. So our approach was, we've been banking with Absa for many, many years, and we knew they had a renewable energy division, and we found a supplier who's going to be able to walk with us not only today but for the next 20 years, 30 years and beyond, and that's very, very important. Absa were extremely supportive right from the initial stages of our renewable energy project through to the actual construction and development stage, and just making sure that all the checks and balances were in place. It's extremely important to be sustainable in agriculture, to ensure that you've got the right partners. And Absa is definitely more than just a bank. Absa is a partner in our business.
Congress, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Absa. Nico, now you can conclude your election announcement.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry for the interruption. Congratulations, Patrick Stuurman. You are being elected as an additional member.
Congratulations, Patrick.
Chair, can I please ask, the last nomination of the day is now for the various regions. Die ongelyke streke vir jou gekies nuwe hoofbestuurslede. Voorstel, so ek vra vir die ongelyke genommerde streke om op bladsy 5 julle nominasies ons in te gee. Onthou, die genomineerde, die sekondant en die voorsteller moet opbetaalde lede wees. Wanneer u die sal uitlaat, asseblief dit ingee by die verkiesingskomitee. En môre kondig ons die uitslaa aan. Baie dankie.
Goed, Kongressie het dit. Ons gaan dan aan. Die streke sal julle raadslede dan nou verkies. Dit inhandig en ons sal môre die aankondigings dan maak. Ons gaan nou vir Herman Groenewald, bestuurder van John Deere Financial, vorentoe roep om met ons te kom deel, net voordat ons vanaand se braai kan geniet. Herman?
Can you reap what you sow season after season? In a world of constant change, success relies on constant innovation, planning, and flexibility. Success requires partners with insight into your business, expertise to guide your decisions, and the ability to build solutions specifically for you. John Deere Financial is built to enable your success. We understand that agriculture is ever evolving, which is why we give our clients access to the best John Deere technology with flexible payment and leasing options. John Deere Financial provides personalized financial solutions so life can leap forward every season.
Kongres, kom ons gee vir Herman 'n kans. Herman, jy staan nou tussen die manne en hulle braai. Dis nogal 'n uitdaging.
Ek gaan dit vinnig maak, voorsitter. Graag
Nee.
SA bestuur, dankie.
Vinnig is goed, maar maak seker is deeglik.
Dis deeglik. Geagte lede, baie dankie. Dis altyd 'n voorreg om 'n dag soos vandag by te woon. Ons bedank julle daarvoor. Dit is belangrik vir ons om altyd te verstaan wat in die industrie aan die gang is en hoe ons daarbey kan aanpas. Nou, ek wil vandag net 2 items aanraak. Ek wil graag ook net vir julle uitwys wie saam met my hier is van die John Deere en John Deere Financial span. En dan wil ek so 'n gedagte los oor hoe mense na finansiering kyk in 'n jaar soos wat ons nou beleef. Nou om voor te stel, Antwa staan gewoonlik hier voor. Antwa is ook weer vandag hierso. Antwa van der Westhuizen, die van julle wat hom nie ken nie. Hy is die besturende direkteur van John Deere Financial, Afrika en Midde-Ooste. Hy sit hier in die middel. Antwa, ek kan vra dat jy net opstaan en laat almal kan sien die wat jou nie ken nie. Daar's Antwa, so as julle hom vanaand sien, asseblief trek hom vas, gesels met hom. Dis die lekkerste gedeelte van ons werk, is om met julle te gesels. En dan ook saam met ons is Stefan Gous. Nou Stefan Gous is 'n ou bekende in John Deere. Hy het ons so vir 5 jaar verlaat wat hy in ons kantoor in Singapore gaan werk het. Maar hy het einde laas jaar het hy teruggekom en hy is die direkteur van verkope en bemarking Afrika en Midde-Ooste vir John Deere. Nou Stefan, is ek reg, sit jy hierso of so hier, daar is hy daar regs agter, julle links. Daar steek hy sy hand op. So trek hom ook asseblief vas vanaand en gesels met hom. En reg langs Stefan is Henty Breed. Henty, as jy net kan jy nou nie, daar is Henty. Hy is die bemarkingsbestuurder van John Deere. So al hierdie goeders wat julle op Nampo sien, hy is die man agter dit. Nou ja, dis die span wat hier is vandag. As ons kyk na finansiering, bietjie meer op 'n ernstige noot. In 'n jaar wat ons soos vanjaar het, wat bietjie swaarder is daar 3 maniere of hoofstrome van denke wat 'n mens kan hanteer op 'n jaar soos die met jou finansiering van jou toerusting. Die eerste een is om te sê, maar ek het die kontant, ek wil nie finansier nie, want my bank kan my dalk bietjie roer as dit swaar gaan. Nou, ek sê 'n voorstander van daai ene nie, want jy sluit al jou kapitaal op in 1 jaar. So as jy bietjie vasdraai, is daai kapitaal weg, hy's in die masjiene. So ek's nie 'n voorstander van daai ene nie, maar daar is plek vir dit. Die tweede een is, ek vervang glad nie en ek brei glad nie uit nie. Nou, ek gaan my ouderdom nou hier weggee, toe ek in laat 90's begin het in bankwese, toe het ons daai tydperk beleef waar rentekoerse 24% gaan draai het. En daar het ek 'n bestuurder gehad en hy het vir my gesê, onthou nou, besigheid is soos 'n fietsresies, om aan te sluit by Nico se analogie. Jy wen nie die fietsresies in die afdraandes nie, jy wen hom in die opdraandes. Nou hierdie is 'n opdraande jaar. Ons moet aanhou trap, soos julle gaan aanhou trap, gaan ons aanhou trap. My span weet, die jaar gaan ons heel waarskynlik 'n klomp uitstelle van paemente kry, en is reg, want dis 'n swaarder jaar, en ons staan agter ons boere. Dan die derde een, natuurlik een waarvan ek die meeste hou, is finansiering. Nou, ons het in die goeie jare het ons gesien, die boere finansier groot deposito's op kort termyne. Nou, ek verstaan, niemand wil rente betaal nie, ek ook nie. Maar in 'n jaar soos vanjaar, versprei jou risiko. Gebruik dalk 'n kleiner deposito, spaar daai kapitaal, bedryfskapitaal, bewaar jou kontantvloei en rek die termyne bietjie. Versprei jou risiko oor 'n langer termyn, 5 jaar. Ek weet dis nie lekker om rente te betaal nie, maar daar's 'n plek en 'n tyd vir alles en ek dink dis van hierdie jaar die plek en die tyd. Voorsitter, dan op jou oproep vroeër, maak dit goedkoper. Finansiering is 'n manier om affordability aan te spreek. Nou, ek weet die rentekomponent is daar, maar we also hear the deeper calling for making it affordability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Nico, laaste aankondiging vir die dag.
Voorsitter, die BlackBerry devices, binne is 'n wit kaartjie, dis 'n registrasiekaart. neem dit asseblief saam en hou dit, want u gaan dit môreoggend gebruik. Die device kan u op die tafel los, dit word vanaand weer gelaai met batterye. So, voorstel, asseblief, hou u witkaartjie, dis u stemkaart vir môreoggend. Baie dankie.
Goed, Kongres, dan gaan ons die dag afsluit. Ek dink ons kan tevrede voel dat ons al ons dagtake afgehandel het, laat ons dit te hoë gehalte gehou het, en ek voel ons kan tevrede wees met vandag se verrigtinge. Pieter de Jaar. Goed, dan gaan ek vra dat ons net vir 'n oomblik stil word, laat ons seën vra op die ete wat ons gaan geniet, daarna gaan ons staan en ons volkslied sing, en dan geniet ons samesyn vir die aand. So kom ons wees vir 'n oomblik stil, en dan vra ons die seën. Kom ons buig ons hoofde. Our Lord and Heavenly Father, this morning we ask you to be present. We experienced that. Thank you, Lord, for guiding us, for inspiring us, and for opening our minds and our hearts to what was shared with us today. Lord, we pray that you're going to bless this fellowship that we're going to enjoy this evening, that you bless the meal that is prepared for us. You bless the hands that prepared it, and the farmers and the laborers that grew it, and keep us ever mindful of those less fortunate. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.